Okay, the recording is now going, Tobias, and I am recording our conversation. And we are going to use your responses to what we talk through as evidence of your knowledge in relation to the unit, prepare for on and participate in quality units, which is part of your modern apprenticeship. Are you comfortable that I do the recording?
Yes, I'm happy with that.
That's great. That's excellent. It makes life very easy. Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by talking about knowledge criteria number 1. And we're going to just work through them from 1 to 10. There's only 10. I understand you've got them open on your side as well, so it should be quite straightforward. Okay, cool. So the first knowledge criteria then relates to quality management principles and methods. And before I started the recording, I actually just Googled quality management principles. And I got quite an interesting page that popped up. Are you able to do the same thing?
Yes,
See if you can Google quality management principles, and then probably what pops up is the first one that pops up for me is 8 quality management principles for ISO 9001 2015, and it talks about 8 principles. Are you on the same page?
So the first one is customer focus.
Good. Yeah.
Leadership, involvement of people, process approach.
Yes, that's the one I was hoping you for. Tell me about the other 4.
There's system approach to management, continuous improvement, factual approach to decision making, and mutually beneficial supplier relationships.
Excellent. So those are the suggested 8 principles for quality management in terms of ISO 9001. ISO 9001. Are you familiar with ISO 9001?
Yes, the previous company I worked for worked in accordance with the ISO standards.
Excellent. Okay, so ISO it's sort of the international standard and standards organization, and the 9001 series focuses on quality management. A lot of people find quality management very boring, to be honest. But I mean, with you with your sort of health and safety background will probably more than others appreciate the importance of a standardized approach to high quality. So it's really about a business is taking responsibility for making sure that they carry out their tasks in accordance with the minimum requirements.
Yes, I think where I got most of my understanding was with my previous company, because we were service orientated.
Okay. We
had to ensure that the service we provided was always in accordance with an internationally accepted standard.
Yeah.
And that there's not one standard for one client and one for another. So it always maintained and that's where the ISO approach was integral to our operation.
Why do you think clients like that?
Because they are held accountable. Well, shareholders is one.
Yeah.
So especially the bigger corporations, they are under shareholder pressure to work.
Yeah.
Through a.
So if the companies that you're dealing with see that you are working in accordance with ISO 9001, what message does that give to them about you?
It's I'd say the first word that pops into mind is professional.
Good, I like that.
It demonstrates that we follow professional practices.
Yeah. So then they can rely on you.
And they can rely on us to meet their requirements.
Yeah, it gives them a feeling of like
security almost, or
spot on. Gives them security, gives them comfort, gives them a reassurance that your organization is at a standard that is measured internationally, and it meets that standard. And that's a really fantastic thing to have. Okay, we got a little bit sidetracked off the principles and methods, but it kind of overlaps with your customer focus, doesn't it? Because the first principle is customer focus, so that your customer is going to look at you and say, do you work in accordance with ISO 9001, yes or no? Yes, we do. Oh, fantastic. That gives us comfort. That means somebody else independently has gone into your business, checked it out, and is comfortable that the systems that you operate and the processes you operate are at a high standard. So that's really good. Yeah. Another focus on leadership. So leadership, that's kind of that's a really interesting principle, because in order to maintain a high standard or quality of work, you've got to have your leaders setting the example and managing the situation and leading you in a way that demonstrates competence in your area of expertise. So that's great. Involving the people, it's one thing. I've worked in places where they've got really good quality managers in place, but they sit outside the business, or they sit in a separate division or department.
Yes, I understand exactly where you're coming from.
And where people look at them as,
you've got someone who is office-based most of the time and a bit out of touch with what's happening operationally.
Yeah.
If they're not, or someone who's on site all the time is completely out of touch with what's happening at head office.
Someone who's on site might not be sort of familiar with how important it is to keep appropriate and transparent records about everything that goes on. For instance, it's more important to him that the fish are healthy and they're fed at the right times, and the nets are cleaned and changed, and or whatever the vessels are serviced, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Good. I like that. Absolutely. Okay. A process approach. So a process approach would describe the way your company carries out its activities. So,
yes.
For instance, there would be a process to how you engage your HR, how your HR team engages with your people. There'll be annual appraisals, or there won't be, or there'll be annual staff adjustments, or there won't be, or there'll be reports to the board. There'll be health and safety things to be processes to be put in place, which you and I have worked on already. So the process approach is really a descriptor of how the business goes about its business, I suppose.
Yeah, that's great.
So the one example that I can think of that you and I have worked through is your operational plan.
Yes.
That's a really good document, and it describes how what sort of processes you go through in order to make sure that your health and safety standards are appropriate and are not only just written about, that they actually happen out on the site.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a good thing about finding the right person to do the job in terms of quality, because, as you say, if the person's too much office bound, then it becomes a paperwork exercise, and if the person's too much operational, then there's not enough traceability and auditability to meet the auditory requirements.
Yeah. It's just getting the balance right. That's
yeah, absolutely. Systems approach to management. So you've got the right people leading the right teams. You've got the right ratios of people to managers and things like that. Described. Continuous improvement. This is an interesting one. A lot of businesses focus on this. This is just about getting better at getting better. So this is about making sure that when you learn things, that you document them and you share them with the right people. So the courses that you've been on, the health and safety courses that you've been on, and then you've presented a version of what you've learned to your colleagues. Can you remind me of some of those courses where you've shared your knowledge with some of your team?
I'd say the big one has been the health and safety side. I'm basing a lot on experience, but the technical aspect of it has been through the IOSH managing safety course that I did.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And then
is that where the idea for replacing your ropes with slings came from?
No, that's just the idea came from, we were looking at deficiencies in our operations.
Okay.
And lifting operations was one of the areas that's been marked for improvement.
Okay.
Because unfortunately, it's not meeting the safety standards at the moment.
Yeah.
It's work in progress. It's still going to take, I think, a couple more years before we
Are they still using ropes, or have they adopted the slings completely now?
No, ropes are still in use. It's
yeah, okay.
It's a common industry issue.
Yeah.
Where we try and drive things, but you have people who've been working in remote locations most of their life, doing things in a specific way.
Yeah.
And their perception and understanding of why this is being driven does not always
yeah, it doesn't match up.
match up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
okay.
it's what some of the other companies have, for example, whereas I'm very much site and operational. Their safety reps and officers and managers sometimes come onto site for a one-day visit, and will try and initiate something or engage with the teams.
Yeah.
Their idea of something that's dangerous would not be the site guy's idea of something that's dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's finding that balance and getting people.
Yeah.
To and also like taking a forceful approach is often immediate or reactionary met with resistance.
Yeah.
When people
Absolutely.
are forced to do something without knowing why they'll naturally resist it.
Yep, they will. However, I think in the end, the answer lies somewhere between those two extremes, doesn't it? Where
yes.
You've got to try and sell the idea to the resistors by demonstrating the value. And until a rope slips or a rope breaks again, all that they're hearing are words.
Yes.
However, I suppose, it doesn't necessarily have to happen to one of your vessels. There will be loads of stories in the industry about the problems with ropes, and there'll be studies and documents and images and hideous photos of ropes snapping and all of that sort of stuff, I'd imagine.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons that I've become more involved in the Scottish Aquaculture Safety Group, because that was developed to standardize the safety within the industry.
Yeah.
And share the lessons learned from mishaps and incidents.
Yeah, you've told me about this before. I remember now. How often does that body meet or communicate with each other or share things, or is it kind of reactionary?
No, there's a formal biannual meeting.
Okay.
Between the regulators and the different health and safety reps from every company.
Okay.
So there's then there's amongst the, throughout the year there are workshops and information is being shared if something happens or if there's updates.
Okay.
So it's basically just to bring everyone together.
Yeah. So when did you last go to that?
The last one was in September, and the next one's coming up on the 5th of March now.
Okay. Was it in Inverness, did you say, the last one?
Yes. Yeah, it's in Inverness.
Is it always in Inverness?
It has been, but the next one will be held in Edinburgh.
Oh, you're coming to Edinburgh?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, because the group the industry's been expanding, and as a result, the group's been expanding because there's been more and more buy-in.
Okay.
They've had to trying to accommodate everyone from different regions in Scotland.
Yeah, I guess that I know. I think back to my trips to the Shetlands and the Orkneys. There's quite a lot that go on there.
Yeah,
quite a lot of fish farming. So yeah, for them to go somewhere, I suppose they might as well go to Glasgow or Edinburgh. And it's the same for you guys. Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's press on a little bit. We've talked through the first 6 sort of principles. 7th one, factual approach to decision making. This is about making decisions based on facts rather than gut feeling or emotion.
Yes.
Evidence of that in terms of quality. is what would be required. So then decisions, factual approach to decision making. So
I'd say I would translate almost to a data-driven approach.
Data-driven approach, that's good.
And I suppose can be gathered, and that can be used as an indicator of where to direct one's focus.
I like it. I like that. Data-driven approach. I suppose that is similar to the arguments we've been talking about in terms of replacing ropes with slings, because the data suggests, all of the evidence is that the ropes are not as safe as the slings.
Yes.
And therefore it's pushing you in that direction. And as a company, you make that decision. And you don't buy any new ropes, for instance. You only buy new slings.
Yes.
So as the ropes wear out, they're replaced with slings, and gradually you're in that position where you've adopted the new system. Okay. Finally, mutually beneficial supplier relationships. This is interesting. When there's some management candidates who I've talked about negotiations with. I don't think we've talked about negotiations as one of your units, but negotiating is about coming to an arrangement with suppliers that is mutually beneficial. So you'll have heard negotiations where you have a win-win result, which is kind of what you're always aiming for. And inevitably what it means is that there's compromises on both sides, so that both people's group of requirements overlaps as much as they possibly can. If you've got a set of requirements and you're negotiating with a supplier, they may be able to satisfy all or some of your requirements, and they will have a set of requirements as well, and probably in terms of payments and times of payment. It's not necessarily only how much you pay for services. It's when they get paid, and maybe sometimes in what currency they get paid and things like that. So there's quite an overlap of requirements in terms of finding a mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I'd say an example I can give you is that we've had recently, within the past years, we've changed our feed supplier.
Okay.
Because the company that we had a contract with closed their UK branch.
Oh wow! Yeah. Okay.
So we've had to. So there's been a lot of negotiating going on behind the scenes with possible new suppliers.
Okay. Okay.
And the director or managing director has chosen 2 suppliers to go with for the foreseeable future. And feed accounts for about 70% of our cost of production.
I like the idea that he's chosen 2 suppliers. I think that's quite smart.
Yeah.
So your eggs aren't all in the one basket.
And because it has such huge cost implications, it's minor details have a significant impact on the company's financial performance.
Yeah.
So that was not I wasn't involved in it, but from what's been shared with me, it was not an easy process to go through.
No, but it sounds like it's worth the pain. If you get into a point where you've got 2 people, 2 suppliers. The good thing about 2 suppliers, it keeps them honest against each other.
Yeah.
It keeps it reasonable. It also means that should one go bust, you've got the other one, or if one starts misbehaving or underperforming, then at least you've got a backup arrangement.
Yes.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, I think we've talked through quality management principles and methods really well. We've got through those 8 principles nicely, and that was a useful discussion. So we're going to press on to knowledge criteria number 2. That took us 20 minutes, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next one is how to monitor work and ensure that it consistently meets quality standards and complies with procedures. So how to monitor work. Tell me a little bit about the work that you're going to be monitoring. It's not work necessarily, it's vessels that you're going to be checking. But there's a plan in order to monitor. Let's call it work, because your vessels are work vessels and they're used for work. So it's the equipment that you're using for work, to make sure that it meets quality standards and complies with procedures. So tell me a little bit about the example of the vessels. What sort of audit is coming, and what are you doing to prepare for it?
So the vessels have to be inspected annually by the Marine Coast Guard Agency, who are the governing or regulating body for all marine activity in the UK.
The MCA, is that Maritime Coast Guard?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so there's a requirement for all your vessels to be checked by the Coast Guard.
So that's a legal requirement. So that there's a basic standard met across the UK.
Okay.
In order to prevent injuries and accidents at sea.
So what are the sort of things they're looking for on the vessels?
So one they'll look at the training of the skippers.
Okay.
So every skipper has to be trained in accordance with a set of criteria.
Okay.
Then for the type of vessel they're operating, and the vessel itself undergoes a hull integrity check.
Okay.
So the hull of a vessel is one. They'll look at any wear and tear on the vessel, signs of corrosion, deterioration.
Does this mean every vessel needs to be lifted out of the water?
Not every year. So there's different periodic time frames. So for example, every 2 years, for example, the vessel will come out for a hull inspection.
Okay.
And then annually, there'll be a visual inspection of all the equipment on the vessel.
All the equipment on the vessel as well.
Then certain types of equipment on the vessel has to be inspected on a regular periodic basis.
What about testing? When you talk about the equipment and you talk about inspections, that means to me, the layman, it means that somebody's looking over something. But yes. Are there any tests that you tell me about the hull integrity test. What do they take like a hammer and tap on the hull and look for scratches?
Yeah, so I think you'll be familiar with non-destructive testing methods.
Yeah.
So the inspection, well, this is something I used to do when I worked in commercial diving. Was we did a lot of survey work and inspection work.
Yeah.
That was so the process that we followed, and that's followed by many surveyors, is they'll start with a general visual inspection.
Okay.
So they get an overall view of what's happening, and then based on that, if they identify any suspect areas, then that will be taken further, and you'll take a more specific method.
Yes.
For example, like taking a hammer and doing an integrity check, or using ultrasound.
Ultrasound, excellent. Okay.
X-ray, magnetic particle inspection for weld seams. So there's various methods that are used for that.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. So I think we've talked through then. Okay, hang on. This is actually the criteria talks about monitoring work to ensure that it consistently meets quality standards. So we've talked about inspections, and we've talked about sort of the regularity and frequency of them as people come in to you. But I think this criteria is actually pushing us to explore together a little bit more about how to make sure on a day-to-day basis through the year between these sort of massive inspections that your work is at a consistently high standard. So when we're talking about the principles of quality management, which we talked through, that's how, I think that's the answer, really, is to make sure that those principles are in place every day.
So I've actually, good example for that is using the vessels again. We have checklists.
Okay, great. So daily checklists.
Using checklists, the skippers or whoever's responsible is required to carry out a daily, weekly, and a monthly inspection.
Excellent.
And these checklists are also applied to various, or can be used for other things. For example, we have a harvesting checklist.
Okay.
For harvesting our fish, so that to ensure that that standard approach is always maintained on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I think checklists have been probably the biggest, or have the biggest impact in maintaining the daily side of it.
It also provides the record that you're doing so, and I think that's where the big inspections, when they come in and they're looking for evidence of consistency, that's what they'll look for. They'll look at your records of your checklist to make sure that things are being done correctly. That makes a lot of sense to me. Very good. Okay. Thank you. That's great. I think we've explored that one together nicely. Let's press on to knowledge criteria number 4. And we've been talking now for 25 minutes, 41. Knowledge criteria number 4, how to identify areas where business processes, quality systems, or procedures could be improved. So continuous improvement is one of the principles of quality management. And I remember in my previous life thinking about some of the processes that we said we would do, which actually became a pain in the backside rather than anything of value for the business. I mean, we used to do loads of projects for clients, maybe some worth 300 quid, some worth 3,000 quid. And what we'd done is we'd allowed our quality management team, who were a bit like the aloof people we discussed earlier in the conversation, to write this all singing, all dancing set of procedures and processes that were totally inappropriate for a £300 job, but were fantastic for a £30,000 job.
Yes.
So in terms of suggestions to improve, we ended up with the situation where we had a simplified quality plan for a small project and a more complex one for a larger project. And at the outset of the project, you could decide which one was more appropriate.
Okay.
Have you got anything similar to that where you've actually improved your quality processes over time?
I'd say harvesting will be one of those areas.
Okay. What do you do differently that's more effective now?
So now the system is mainly automated. So in the past, the fish used to be killed by stunning them on the head with a hand baton.
Wow.
And then using a knife to bleed the gills.
Okay.
Whereas to meet animal welfare standards, but also to improve the quality of the fish, the flesh.
Yeah.
Automating the process has made it more efficient.
Okay.
Also raised the quality of the product that we're producing. So we're able to produce a higher volume or harvest a higher volume of fish at an improved quality. And that's taken years over the years, because as the volume of production increased and as the industry has started maturing, focus has shifted on different aspects of the operation.
Yeah.
It's also very much client driven.
Well, of course, the more you can produce and the higher quality it is, the happier your clients are going to be.
Yes,
I get that. Automation is a really interesting topic. We could get stuck into. It's a very, very hot topic at the moment. You'll see automative. I think they call it AI, didn't they? Artificial intelligence is creeping into everything, from cars to into your. It doesn't surprise me that it's creeping into your industry as well. So it kind of takes the gut feeling or the judgment away from people, and puts it into the hands of the machines.
Yes.
And that's all based on algorithms and equations and calibration of systems and things like that. So I think what will happen in those instances is that people's role in automation will become more to do with calibrating systems and making sure that they're working accurately and at the right time.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, so we were to talk about how to identify areas where business processes, quality systems, or procedures could be improved, and it's making sure that they remain appropriate for the role and the task that they're supposed to address. So making sure that you don't overcomplicate things or oversimplify things on the other side as well. Good. Okay. We're on to number 5 now. I'm hoping they're going to speed up a bit because I've really got another 10 minutes to chat with you.
Okay.
But if we don't finish, then I guess you could just send me your thoughts on the remaining knowledge criteria anyway. That might be a good way to finish. So let's talk for another 9 or 10 minutes and see how far we can get. We're going to do knowledge criteria number 5 now, 30 minutes, 36. How to plan and monitor to ensure that corrective actions are carried out by agreed dates. Okay, well, this is a kind of a project management activity, I guess, really. Yes. Planning and ensuring that corrective actions are carried out by agreed dates. So corrective actions means that you've identified problems and you've decided on a way to resolve the problems. So that probably means that you've had your big audit and the auditors found something that you're not doing correctly. Maybe there's a test that's supposed to be done more frequently than what you're doing it, or maybe you've forgotten to do something, or the sequencing of things might be incorrect, or it could be a number of different things. So, I mean, answering this is a bit generic, really, in terms of corrective actions. So how do you think, let's start by considering where corrective actions might develop. How do you think you might end up knowing or identifying some corrective actions that need to be carried out? What sort of activities would lead to identifying corrective activities?
So one that I could think of would be testing the fat content of our fish.
Okay.
So our fish have to meet specific or be within a
range,
a specific range of values for fat content and color content.
Okay.
And we continuously assess our fish throughout the cycle for that.
Okay.
And if it does not meet the client's requirements, they'll come back to us, and then we, for example, will have to make adjustments to the feed that's being fed.
Okay.
Make alterations to the pigment and the consistency and type of ingredients that are in the feed.
So how will you calculate the adjustments that need to be made?
That's
quite a skill, I'd imagine.
I was going to say that's a skill. That's
the dark art.
It's out of my area of abilities.
Yeah.
There are calculations in place, and what they'll do. They'll know that what they'll do. They look at the correlation between the feed ingredients and what's happening in the actual fish. Okay. So, for example, if the pigment levels are too high, then the color of the fish will be too pink, for example. Okay. And then what they can do, they can make a minor adjustment. So we'll reduce that by 5%. Okay. That should bring the color within a range that meets the client's requirements. Yeah. Roche, we use a Roche scale for that.
Okay, so I guess what you're suggesting then is that this idea of continuous monitoring allows for you to make those adjustments on a small scale, and hopefully you don't end up with a massive problem that needs to have drastic action taken. I think that's probably where we're going with this, with all of this continuous monitoring, continuous improvement. What you're aiming at is a situation where the changes that you identify, or the corrective actions that are identified out of preparing for an audit, would not be massive corrective actions. I mean, you're not going to be forgetting to feed your fish, for instance. No. It's going to be a question of adjusting a 5% mix between the components of the feed or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's correct.
So the corrective actions or as a result of continuous monitoring and testing. Good. Okay, we'll press on knowledge criteria number 6. Industry sector requirements for quality management and auditing. Oh, so we've talked about your industry sector in terms of your health and safety. We've talked about the fish quality. I think we've covered that. Health and safety, fish quality. We've talked about IOSH. We've talked about ISO 9001 principles. We've talked about your Scottish Aquaculture Safety Group. In terms of the audits that are happening, we've talked about the Coast Guard for the vessels. What is the name of the body? We've talked about IOSH for health and safety. What is the name of the body that checks the quality of the fish that that you report to in terms of fat content or color or anything like that?
That would be our clients.
That's just the clients.
So that would be the supermarkets, for example, will have represented, like their quality department will be in touch with us in terms of what's happening.
So would you send them a batch? Okay. Sorry, I was going to say, would it be the case that you would send them a batch and they'd give you some feedback and say, look, those were too pink, or
they because we're harvesting on a continuous or on a weekly basis, they'll have a continuous supply of our fish. They batch test that supply, and if there are any problems, they'll be raised almost immediately. Can make adjustments to that.
Okay. So those are the sectors, the main sectors that we've got through. Okay. We're going to move on. We're going to talk about knowledge criteria number 7 now. Just need to get the 47 minutes. Jeez, have we been talking for 47 minutes already?
Yes.
47 minutes. Time flies when you're having fun, Tobias.
Yes.
Okay. Quality standards and procedures that apply to your area of responsibility as above. We've covered that. Knowledge criteria number 8. The records and documentation required for your area of responsibility. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the health and safety records, any tests, any equipment that's tested, harnesses, life vests, slings, ladders, electrical equipment. Where do you keep all the records for all those tests?
So they'll be kept either at head office or on site, or the vessel, depending on what it is. Most of our crane certificates, for example, because they're tested annually, will be kept at head office.
Okay.
Whereas our vessel certificates are kept on the vessels themselves.
Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah. Requirement.
With things becoming more and more digital, is it the case that these certificates very often are emailed or sent in a PDF format to you guys, and you can store them on a cloud somewhere?
It is slowly moving in that direction.
Yeah.
We still have to keep hard copies of a lot of the stuff.
Imagine, particularly on your vessels. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have to keep a hard copy on the vessel. But hopefully that will transition to being more digital. For example, our audits, you've probably heard of iAuditor.
No, I haven't.
No. So iAuditor is a digital system that you can tailor for yourself. So if you can carry out a site audit, for example, that's automatically uploaded to the cloud and can be accessed, and there's a digital record of that audit.
We have talked about this. Yeah, absolutely. I do remember talking about this. Very good. That's the way everything's moving. Excellent. Okay. Obviously, the point of quality and quality management, I mean, the two words for me that I would like you to keep in mind when you think about quality and quality management are auditability and transparency. So it's about making sure that the records exist for you to prove that you are following the processes that are set out. So the records need to exist for that reason.
Yes.
They're not there to be a box ticking exercise. They are there as proof that you're carrying out things, mandatory activities correctly. Traceability means that you can find them quickly and easily without having to recreate them or dig them out from somewhere that's going to take you too long to find. So a lot of quality management is about establishing a system that makes things easy to find. So that's why I was asking, is it digital, is it hard copy, where do you store it? If your life jackets are looked at on an annual basis or a 6-monthly basis, where do you keep the records for that? I mean, you can't keep them on the life jacket, so they'll have to be probably held centrally, I'd imagine.
Yes, or that will be kept on site.
Okay.
So you'll have each life jacket will have a serial number.
Yeah.
And you'll have the certificate to prove.
So you'll know how many years it's been in service. You'll know how many times it's been looked at, and you'll know if it's been repaired and reintroduced into the system or not. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Cool. Okay. Let's press on to knowledge criteria number 9, and we'll probably be able to do 9 and 10. I've got another phone call at 10 o'clock, so I'm going to have to. I think I do want to carry on because I think it makes sense to just press on and finish these two. Corrective actions agreed in previous audits. So if you've had an audit and they've identified shortcomings, what are the things you can do to prove that you've actually been carried out the activities that you said? So where do you keep the records of your corrective actions?
So an immediate one that comes to mind that we've used in the past is photographs and videos that are dated.
Oh, okay.
If it's a physical change that needs to take place, for example, a repair of something.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah. And the auditor has basically, because they're auditing multiple sites across vast regions, a dated photograph is often sufficient to demonstrate what we did. Otherwise, the next audit, they'll give you a time frame and say that, look, we're going to be coming in 6 months' time for follow-up. This is what needs to be done. Okay.
Fine. I think that's photos and videos and evidence, and then the following up audit. As long as there's a plan in place, and there's another one and another one, then you're fine. Okay. Lastly, recommendations for improvements made in previous audits. I think it's a bit of repetition there. So recommendations for improvements and corrective actions. I think it might just be worth exploring what the difference between those two things might be. Recommendations for improvements are not necessarily corrective actions, because corrective actions need to be done.
Yes.
Whereas recommendations are recommendations, and they may be appropriate, but there may be a reason for you not to carry out an improvement because, for instance, you're changing a vessel, or you're selling the vessel, or you're scrapping the vessel. So why spend an enormous amount of time upgrading the vessel when it's reached the end of its life, for instance, and you're going to be switching it out or something?
Yes, that's correct.
Don't carry out.
It's more of like a gold lining sometimes to what you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm just going to make a note that we've explored the difference between corrective actions, which might be mandatory corrective actions, and then recommendations, which may or may not be appropriate. Cool. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording there. Stop the recording.